You don't hate people, and that is the first illusion you need to shatter, because what you actually despise is what happens inside your nervous system. The moment another human being enters your orbit and that sudden shift in atmospheric pressure that makes your shoulders climb toward your ears and your jaw lock into place, and your breath becomes shallow and quick and insufficient, is not a personality flaw. It is a physiological response to an environment that has never felt truly safe, and the reason you have built a life so meticulously controlled, so obsessively curated, so deliberately empty of spontaneity and surprise is not because you are cold or antisocial or broken in some fundamental way. That survival depends on prediction, and prediction requires distance, and distance requires walls, and walls eventually become the only thing you recognize as home. But here is what you have not allowed yourself to fully acknowledge yet in the quiet hours when the mask slips and the performance ends, and you are left alone with the echo of your own breathing. Your isolation is not a preference. It is a symptom of an empathy so exquisitely calibrated, so painfully acute, so relentlessly active, that being around other people feels like standing in the middle of a hurricane without shelter, while everyone around you calmly discusses the weather. And that is the exhaustion that nobody sees, that is the weight that nobody measures, that is the silent scream that never escapes your throat. Because how do you explain to someone who experiences the world through a single lens what it feels like to experience it through 1,000 lenses simultaneously, to feel their anxiety, before they name it, to absorb their grief like a sponge, to carry their unspoken shame in your own bones, to become so porous, so permeable, so utterly defenseless against the emotional chaos of others, that you start to lose the boundary between where they end and where you begin. And that is the real tragedy, because you were trained for this by a childhood that demanded hypervigilance as the price of safety by caretakers whose moods shifted like weather patterns, and whose love was conditional on your ability to read their needs before they expressed them. And so you learn to be the caretaker, the fixer, the emotional garbage disposal, the one who absorbs so that others can remain comfortable, and you learn to silence your own hunger, to ignore your own exhaustion, to suppress your own rage, because someone else's need always felt more urgent, more legitimate, more worthy of attention than your own. And somewhere in that process of perpetual self-abandonment, you lost the ability to feel your own feelings, because you were too busy feeling everyone else's, and you lost the ability to know your own mind, because you were too busy mirroring the minds of those around you, and you lost the ability to exist as a separate person, because separation meant danger, and attunement meant safety, and so you became a ghost, a reflection, a placeholder, a vessel for everyone else's projections, and you called it empathy because that was the only word you had, but what it really was survival, and that survival mechanism is now the very thing that is suffocating you, because it has convinced you that the only way to be safe is to be alone, and the only way to be alone is to be invisible, and the only way to be invisible is to erase yourself piece by piece until there is nothing left but a hollow shell that goes through the motions of living while secretly yearning for a connection it has forgotten how to make. But here is the truth that will either break you open or keep you locked in your cage forever, and that truth is that the isolation you have mistaken for safety is actually a slow and patient form of death. A death of your capacity for joy, a death of your ability to trust, a death of your hope that anyone could ever truly see you and still choose to stay. Because the longer you remain in your carefully constructed fortress, the more you forget that there is a world outside it, and the more you forget how to speak the language of intimacy, and the more you shrink your life to fit the walls you built, the more those walls feel like the only reality that exists. And so you tell yourself that you prefer it this way, that you are self-sufficient, that you have transcended the petty need for human connection, that you are different, better, stronger, more evolved than those desperate, needy creatures who cannot survive without validation from others. But that story is a lie that your ego tells you to protect itself from the terrifying truth that you are just as hungry for connection as everyone else. And the only difference is that you have been rejected so many times, so profoundly, so devastatingly, that you have convinced yourself to hate the very thing you want most, because wanting it means risking it, and risking it means potentially losing it, and losing it would confirm the deepest, most shameful belief you carry, which is that you are fundamentally unlovable, that there is something wrong with you, something broken, something that makes you too much for the world and not enough for yourself, and that belief is the prison that holds you, not the isolation itself. And the walls of that prison are not made of concrete or steel. They are made of memories. Of being misunderstood, of having your sensitivity mocked, and your depth dismissed, and your intensity pathologized, of being told you are too emotional, too dramatic, too intense, too much, and of being abandoned by people who could not handle the weight of your love. And so you learn to make yourself small, to dim your light, to hide your fire, to become palatable, acceptable, digestible to a world that was terrified of your truth. And that self-betrayal is the source of the emptiness you feel late at night, because you are not missing other people. You are missing yourself, the version of you that existed before you learned to perform for approval, before you learned to walk on eggshells, before you learned to apologize for existing. And that version of you is still in there, buried under years of survival adaptations, under layers of protective armor, is because isolation is the only place where that buried version can even breathe. The only place where you do not have to perform or manage or anticipate or predict. The only place where you can finally remove the mask and let your face be whatever it wants to be, without fear of judgment, without fear of rejection, without fear of being seen as weak. And that is not a sickness, that is a testament to your resilience. But here is the complication, the part that makes everything messy and terrifying and necessary. Your isolation is not just protecting you from others, it is protecting others from you, because there is a version of you, a shadow version, a version that scares you more than anything else, that can see every flaw, every weakness, every hidden shame in everyone you meet, and can use that knowledge as a weapon. And you know that version exists because you have glimpsed it in moments of anger, in moments of betrayal, and you saw the cold calculation behind your own eyes, and you felt the capacity for cruelty that lurks beneath your empathy, and that capacity terrifies you. Because if you are capable of such coldness, then what does that make you? And the answer that you cannot bear to face is that it makes you human, it makes you complex, it makes you a person who carries both the capacity for profound love and profound destruction. And the presence of one does not negate the other, and the existence of your darkness does not make your light any less real. And the truth that you desperately need to hear is that your fear of your own capacity for harm is not proof that you are dangerous. It is proof that you are conscious. And consciousness is the first step toward choice. And choice is the first step toward freedom. And freedom is the first step toward the life. You have been too afraid to live, but that life requires you to do something that feels impossible. It requires you to trust that you are not the monster your trauma has convinced you that you are. It requires you to believe that you can be close to someone without destroying them, or being destroyed in return. It requires you to risk the pain of rejection in exchange for the possibility of being truly known. And that risk feels insurmountable because your entire nervous system has been conditioned to treat connection as a threat, and your entire identity has been built around the belief that you are better off alone, and your heart has been broken so many times so thoroughly that it has forgotten how to open without bracing for impact. And so you stay in your fortress and you call it peace. But peace does not feel like, this peace does not feel like a cage. Peace does not feel like a slow suffocation. Peace does not feel like the gradual erasure of your own existence, and the fact that you are still searching, still hoping, still believing that there might be another way, is proof that the part of you that wants connection is still alive. And that part is not weak, it is the strongest part of you, because it has survived every rejection, every abandonment, every betrayal, and it is still reaching, still yearning, still believing that connection is possible. And that part of you is right, connection is possible, but not with everyone, and not all at once, and not without risk, and not without pain, and not without the possibility of failure. But failure is not the end. It is a lesson, it is a step on the path toward finding the people who can hold your depth, who can match your intensity, who can see your shadows, and not flinch, who can love you not in spite of your complexity, but because of it, and those people exist. They are walking this earth right now searching for someone exactly like you, someone who understands what it means to feel too much, someone who knows the weight of empathy, someone who has been through the fire and emerged with wisdom instead of bitterness. And the only way you will find them is by leaving your fortress, by opening your door, by letting the light in, by risking the exposure that terrifies you. And that does not mean abandoning your boundaries or trusting everyone you meet. It means learning to distinguish between a real threat and an old fear. It means learning to recognize when your alarm bells are ringing because something is truly dangerous, and when they are ringing because something reminds you of a danger that no longer exists, and that discernment takes time and practice and compassion for yourself. When you get it wrong, but every time you choose to stay, instead of run every time you choose to speak, instead of silence every time you choose to be seen, instead of invisible, you are weakening the walls of your prison and strengthening the muscles of your connection. And those muscles have been atrophied from disuse, but they are not gone. They are waiting. They are ready. They are aching to be used. And the first step is the hardest because it requires you to admit that you have been wrong about yourself, that you are not broken, that you are not too much, that you are not dangerous, that you are a deeply feeling, deeply human being who has been protecting a heart that is finally ready to be seen. And when you let that heart be seen, when you stop hiding, when you stop performing, when you stop apologizing for your existence, something shifts, something fundamental, something that changes the entire trajectory of your life. Because the people who were never meant for you will fall away, and the people who were always meant for you will find their way to your door, and they will not run from your darkness because they have their own, and they will not ask you to be smaller because they want you to be larger. And those are the people who will remind you that connection is not a threat, it is a gift, and that your empathy is not a curse, it is a superpower that you have been misusing, and that the isolation you have mistaken for safety is actually the very thing that has been keeping you from the life you deserve. And so, the question that remains is not whether you are capable of connection, because you are. The question is whether you are willing to risk the pain of connection, for the possibility of a love that sees everything and still chooses to stay. And that is a question only you can answer, and the answer is found in your heart, and your heart has been waiting for you to listen. And it is saying what it has always said, which is that you are worthy, you are worthy, you are worthy. And that is not a belief you need to earn. It is a truth you need to remember. And remembering it will not make the fear disappear, but it will make the fear manageable. And managing the fear is the only thing that stands between you and the life you have been dreaming of, and that life is waiting for you right now in this moment, in this breath, in this choice to stay, instead of run and staying, does not mean you will never feel overwhelmed again. It means you will stop treating isolation as your only option and start treating it as one of many. And when you have options, you have freedom. And when you have freedom, you have the capacity to choose connection, not because you need it to survive, but because you want it to thrive. And that is the difference. That is the shift. That is the transformation that will take you from a life of quiet desperation to a life of profound meaning. Because meaning is not found in the absence of pain. It is found in the presence of love, and love requires connection. And connection requires risk, and risk requires courage, and courage is not the absence of fear, it is the decision that something is more important than fear, and that something for you is the possibility of being seen, truly seen, without masks, without armor, without performance, and being loved anyway, because of who you are not, despite who you are. And that love is not a fantasy, it is your birthright, and it has been waiting for you to claim it, and claiming it starts with this moment, this realization, this quiet revolution in your own mind, where you finally accept that you are not alone, because you are not. And you never were, you just forgot how to let anyone in, and forgetting is not your fault, but remembering is your responsibility. And you are ready to remember. You have always been ready. You just needed someone to tell you that it was okay to stop running. And so I am telling you now, it is okay to stop running. It is okay to rest. It is okay to let someone else carry the weight for a while. It is okay to trust that you are not too much, and you are not too little. You are exactly the right amount. And that is enough. That has always been enough. And now it is time to live like you believe it.